David Shale pushed a foot toward the ground with an audible gasp. Then he did it again with the other. "Shit!" he yelled and stamped a foot down again, struggling to keep a steady, rhythmic drive on the pedals that had been steadily slowing as he and his Triumph climbed a summit of Crossback Ridge. The trees surrounding the narrow snake-like road didn't answer, but a humid breeze slipped across the back of his neck like an intimate breath. When he'd left the sleepy town of Castle Point, he'd been a well-oiled engine, feet rising and dipping with the precision of pistons, steadily adding speed and distance to his ride. But now, 20 minutes later, the sweat dripped from his forehead like a bad leak and his legs were on fire with fatigue. You didn't fast pump your way across the ridge, at least normal folk wouldn't. But David wasn't interested in normal. David was interested in the Olympic cycling team. And after leading Boston University's cycling team for 2 years, and then washing out at the Olympic tryouts, David was definitely not interested in a normal training regimen. Training normal was cool for college. It didn't cut it for where he wanted to go. So this summer, when he'd come to stay with his aunt for a break, he decided to use her backyard as the course. Nobody biked Crossback Ridge. Hell, most people wouldn't hike it. "Fucking shit!" he added for emphasis and pumped an impossible pedal down toward the potholed and much-patched asphalted surface that this backwoods county called a road. Something like a tear squeaked out of the corner of his left eye, and he pushed his other foot down with a moan. If you'd called it a tear, he would have punched now and asked what you meant later. David Shale was no sissy. It was something else that definitely was not a tear. "Fuck!" he screamed in a voice that echoed back across the ridge like a moose call. "Damn! Damn! Damn!" he huffed, slowly picking up speed again. It was going to be a long summer. The climb ended without warning. 1 minute, David was straining to keep the wheels creeping forward, standing hard on the pedals for every inch. The next, and he was above the ridge, high on the plateau, looking out over a drop of hundreds of feet of emerald green. The roadway was cut into a limestone rock face behind him, and at the top, a lone tree hung like a slanting bonsai over the cutback. But as the road continued, it disappeared around the bend of the ridge and down at a breakneck drop. Here, for a few yards, was the only flat surface he'd seen in the past hour. David stepped off the bike and gently laid it to the gravel. He stepped to the edge of the ridge and took a deep breath, crouching down to ease the strain in his legs, which currently felt something like unbendable iron rods. The air was clean, rich in the scent of life. For miles all around, the landscape was blanketed in trees, riddled with hidden creek beds and broken by clearings full of wildflowers. This was unspoiled wilderness. God's country. This is the feeling I've missed since I've been away from... Something caught in his throat as his mind choked on the word. Home. He didn't know where home was anymore, which was why he was spending the summer with his aunt. Since the fire, David had been on his own, always with a roof, but never a home. But still, he'd spent plenty of time visiting these hills over the years, and so in some way, it was a homecoming. Point was, air just didn't smell like this anywhere else. As his panting slowed to a semblance of normal respiration, David noticed a small plume of smoke from a spot just a little way down the ridge. He followed it to the ground with his eyes and squinted, then crooked an eyebrow. The smoke was coming from the old Castle House Lodge. His stomach lurched. What if the place was burning down? Castle House had been closed for most of his life. Even as an outsider who came up here to visit once in a while, he knew the stories. It was the local equivalent of a haunted house, an old mansion from another era, fallen on hard times and long boarded up. Before the Depression, the place had been a private resort hotel for the turn of the 1900s rich. And unlike a lot of big money kinds of resorts, the place had survived the 20s and 30s and staggered on as a destination for families with names like Rockefeller into the 50s. But then the whole ridge changed. The rich and famous stopped going to the hill country for vacations.